Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. This is going to be messy. And in this video, what I'd like to do is follow on from the mutual hypocrisy of Boris Johnson and Ian Blackford in their spat in Wednesday's PMQs and discuss the reality of what the post-Brexit British market is going to inflict on all of us. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, I was talking briefly about the barney between Ian Blackford of the SNP and Boris Johnson of the Conservatives on Wednesday. Each used exactly the same arguments as each other against each other. And I'm sorry if there's any supporters of the SNP here. I mean, there may be supporters of the Conservatives, but you don't usually like what I have to say. But if you are a supporter of the SNP and it's more hero worship than respect you have for them, you may need to look away for a minute or two. Well, I get this out of the way in order to remove the party politics from what I need to discuss. So, as I said on Wednesday, Blackford complained that Boris Johnson's grab for power, formerly held by the European Parliament and now being repatriated, should be properly devolved, as they surely would have been had they been a member of the EU. Now, this is perfectly true and I agree, but Boris Johnson responded by saying actually these powers are being devolved. They sort of are and they are not. But in terms of the general thrust of Blackford's argument, it was too easy for Johnson to counter because he noted that the SNP is pro-European and wants to be a member of the single market, whether as an independent Scotland or part of the UK. That is somewhat at odds with wanting to erect a trade barrier on their southern border. It is a clear contradiction in policy. You are either in favour of free trade across your borders or you are not. But that same contradiction is also evident in the Conservatives, because they are saying in this particular case they don't want trade barriers, and yet they are pushing forward a form of Brexit that creates them not only between the UK and every single surrounding country to the west, to the east and to the south of us, but also a trade barrier inside the UK itself. They are creating a customs border inside the UK between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and having the nerve to attack the SNP for wanting to do the same. It's enough to do your head in. But with the party political stuff out the way, the arguments about not devolving these powers properly are twofold. First, it weakens the union. Of course it does, goes without saying. People like to think that local issues are decided locally. Humans are tribal in nature, and it makes us quite insular in many ways. We're not at ease with large, complex societies, and we need them breaking down. Devolution is marvellous for this. It's much better than just breaking up a country, because when you have a large nation and a large national government to deal with national matters on the world stage, you get the benefit of being part of a wealthy, powerful nation internationally, but you still want internal matters decided on a more regional basis to avoid the fallacy of the one-size-fits-all approach that usually doesn't actually fit anyone. Devolution strengthens a union, and so reining back devolution will only heighten feelings of not being listened to, and therefore increasing division. The second impact is it is going to lead to a race to the bottom. I do agree with the SNP on this one. Normally, a national single market wouldn't even be in the slightest bit contentious. Of course it wouldn't. Of course you're going to have... You don't even talk about a single market inside a nation. Of course it is the same market. Even with a devolved nation like the UK, or partially devolved nation. If England had been split up into 3 or 4 devolved areas at the same time as everywhere else, we wouldn't be having all this nationalist bullshit right now. But anyway, the fact is that the fury that Scottish nationalists are feeling about Johnson's moves here are no different to what English nationalists thought of the EU. Only in Johnson's case, their reasoning is a bit more valid because he genuinely is trying to take away their democratic right to choose. But the perception is the same. That's the point. And with Johnson being seen to be denying Scottish Parliament powers over Scottish matters, that same perception, because perception is everything in politics, will only increase in Scotland. Most people may not actually understand what powers are and are not being denied as a result of actions this week. The union flag waving morons that powered Boris Johnson to his power base will consign that same flag to history very soon. I mean, that is my fear. But I digress. Very sorry. Very raw point for me. The point is that Johnson wants to lower our standards for the sake of his US trade deal. We know that. No other major economy in the world is requiring us to do this to trade with us. But we're in the unfortunate position of having a government that favours this one destructive government's influence over all of the others put together. And Trump isn't even subtle about his castration of our country. He is boasting that Boris Johnson has taken the action against Huawei, for example, that he has because the Orange One told him to, or he could piss off with his trade talks. And if one part of our market has lower standards, the rest will have to descend to that level in order to compete. Now, here's the thing, and this is where it can get confusing for some people. The government are arguing that the powers being discussed here are being devolved. Because in Scotland, for example, it will be the Scottish Parliament that sets standards for producers, including of food. So what's all the fuss about? Because that is true, by the way. You may imagine that we're talking about a situation where Scotland doesn't get to set food standards in Scotland. That's not what's happening. That will be for the Scottish Parliament. That power will be devolved to them. The issue is simply this. So, although Scotland will decide on the legal minimum standards for Scottish farmers, for example, covers other industries as well, but let's focus on farming, they will not get a say in the standards of foods that may be sold in their markets. They would be forced to accept whatever standards are decided by Westminster. And Westminster does not really seem to be planning on having any standards at all. This would mean Scottish farmers, I mean, it means British farmers in general, by the way. This isn't a specifically Scottish issue, but from the point of view of the SNP, this would mean Scottish farmers going out of business unless the Scottish Parliament allowed them to lower their standards in order to compete. In other words, race to the bottom. It is abhorrent. And it's not even really a devolution issue, because again, this is where the party politics is making a mess of it. It's not a devolution issue, because it's not like there are people in England that want this and it's just people in Scotland don't. Nobody wants this. Devolution is about not having one part of the country set the pattern of life for the rest just because it's the most populous. No part of the country is in favour of this policy. No part of the UK. No part of England. The only place that wants this is the United States. Of course, if the US trade deal can be torpedoed, which may be helped by Trump losing the election this November, and if we can delay the talks in the meantime, then there may yet be hope. I mean, we know it's not good for anyone because a condition of the talks imposed by the United States is that the details of the deal are not allowed to be revealed. Bear in mind, talks are happening privately right now. They're not supposed to be private. You'll notice our talks with the EU aren't private. They are with the US. And one of the conditions is we're not even allowed to reveal details of the agreement once it's been signed. When it's been signed, we've got to wait 5 years before it's allowed to be published. I don't even know how that works. So years after an agreement has been formally signed, we still won't be allowed to see what our so-called elected representatives have actually signed us up for. But regardless of whether this goes ahead or not, it's poking at the wounds of nationalism in the UK because it's going to be seen as an attack on devolution in Scotland and Wales. Northern Ireland not so much because they're going to be aligned with EU standards anyway. It's not an issue for them. Something that Scotland would have been in favour of. They were saying when this was announced, well, why can't we have that then? Because if the SNP could choose to have just one trade barrier, they would choose their southern border every time. And this is what really outrages me more than any other topic, because Boris Johnson has already cost me one citizenship and he's about to cost me another. I'm about to have no citizenship at all. And it's been propelled by a support base that, although could be anti-European, you got that, you understood that, still abhorrent, but you understood it. But the support base that's propelling him to the power he's got, they actually genuinely think they're British patriots, but they're actually destroying Britain as a people. Because before I die, it is very likely the world will simply, when they talk about Britain, mean this big rock sticking out the sea. And it'll have no greater significance than that, except, of course, in the history books. But there it is. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.